Welcome everybody. We got a extremely full house tonight, which is a beautiful thing because usually that makes for a better presentation because we get more questions and we're talking about the stuff that's important to you, and that's kind of the goal. But like I said, a pretty crowded room tonight, so let's just give everybody a minute or two to get settled. We'll do brief introductions. We'll talk some kind of housekeeping admin stuff, and then we will make sure that we dive into the kind of the subject matter at hand today. And thank you for that. How's everybody doing today? We're doing good. I was just being a little bit of a baby to Brian offline, complaining that I felt like I was too busy during these summer months, but I hopefully caught myself a little bit. I'm grateful that for all the opportunities is the healthier attitude. So we'll try to lean in there. Okay, let's start with housekeeping stuff. We love questions. It makes for a better presentation. Fire at will. Great part about these things is you can be anonymous, right? You can ask a really personal question. You can ask something that you feel like is a stupid question you're embarrassed about. This is a perfect opportunity. I'm going to be shocked if between the two of us, you're going to be able to stump us, test us, right? Challenge us. We welcome it. Please put your questions in the Q&A. That way everybody gets the benefit from them. That will help us out. And whichever one of us isn't speaking is going to be banging away in that Q&A. So that'll allow us to harvest everything. It may be one or two times tonight we might ask you to throw something in chat, right? As a matter of fact, I'll start there right now. We'll see what type of participation we have. We usually get a very geographically diverse crowd. We're all in all 50 states typically, and we get a bunch of folks from overseas and our buddies in Canada and Mexico below us. But tell us where you're at. Where you at in the country? That's always kind of fun to see. You're stuck with two Boston boys tonight. Usually we try to do better and give you some folks from different parts of the country. Unfortunately, y'all are surrounded here. So there you see it, Brian, as usual, right? We are very well represented. And then actually I'll make it so you guys can see hopefully you guys can all see each other's chats.
All over the place.
Oh, we got a Hawaii, Texas, Wisconsin, Atlanta, Michigan, Illinois, PA.
Sorry, Mexico in there.
Virginia, go Hokies. We got a Brazil. We got Vegas, South Carolina, KC. United States, a little bit of a catch-all there. A couple fans of from South Dakota lately, which has been kind of fun. Okay, so awesome. Again, it's always fun just kind of seeing everybody all over the place. And I'm assuming we got mostly class 2024 families would be my guess. I'm sure there's some go-getters, underclassmen, maybe some 23 folks that want to see if they can right some wrongs from this year. But we're here. I'm going to quickly walk you through a couple of the massive FAFSA changes. You class of 2024 families are the guinea pigs. There's really some sweeping changes in this system overall that you have to be aware of, and because they're going to affect your family to varying degrees. I'll talk quickly about that. And then really the focus tonight is more admissions based, with Brian leading the charge. As much as we're going to try to get to every question tonight, we won't be able to. We will do our best. I guarantee we'll probably get to 100 of them, but we're just outmanned here. We're outgunned. But I'm going to make sure that everybody is crystal clear on how we're going to, how you can interface with Brian, with myself, with both of us moving forward. So when we leave tonight, and we always treat our live folks to some really awesome giveaways, that's not going to be any different. We're going to do that when we close tonight and make sure that you know where to find us beyond tonight. So really quick, by way of introduction, I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm one of the founders at College Aid Pro. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Class 2024 is the 19th class that I've guided through this process. Like to say I've seen it all. I think I've come pretty close. And this is what I love to do. I love to do this. I love to show the families the right way to navigate this beast of a process, this freaking scary, intimidating process. Your money, your kids. What's scarier than that? But it's freaking exciting. Your kids are going to college. So we want to hopefully alleviate a ton of the stress and fear of the unknowns and just kind of guide you the right way through this so you can enjoy the last year with your kids and maybe not go broke in the process. That's kind of, that's the get here from a high level. I love doing these presentations with Brian. I promise tonight, I've done I don't know how many of these with him. Every single time I learn something new. I know I always have my notebook because I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to take some notes. He's who I think, in my opinion, and I value my opinion here because I've met a lot of folks in the admission space. He's on the Mount Rushmore, okay? And part of it is because he's been on every side of this fence, right? He's read over 60,000 college applications, right? And essays. So that's this is the guy that is reading your kids' applications next year. So he, more than anyone that I know, knows what schools are looking for, and he's done it a bunch of different schools and all types of schools. He's also been on the private side. He's been on the high school counselor side. So I just love his kind of multifaceted perspective, and we're always tapping him. And you guys are going to learn a ton tonight. I promise. So Brian, if you want to say hi quick before I say a few words, we'll get cooking.
Yeah, thanks again, Matt. And really excited to be here. Obviously, we're in the summer months, so it's a little more relaxed now. And despite what we were talking about earlier, but I think I like to see that there were a lot of 25 and 26 and even some 27 families here to kind of learn about college admissions. We're going to give kind of a really 30,000 foot overview of kind of what's going on in college admissions right now. As Matt said, I've spent about close to now more than 15 years in college admissions on both sides of the aisle, both on the college side, most recently or most kind of notably at Boston University. And then I've spent the past 7 to 8 years as the director of college counseling and then dean of college counseling at two different prestigious high schools here in Boston, most recently Archbishop Williams High School in Braintree. And then, Matt and I have been working together probably in a matter of ways for almost a decade now, if not more. But recently have kind of, really jumped into College Aid Pro, helping our families from an admission standpoint, whether it be from essays, college list building, all of that. So we'll talk about some of that. We'll talk about some of the things going on in the world today surrounding college admissions. We won't get to everything just because it's impossible. College admissions changes daily, but really excited to speak with all of you about kind of what's going on right now.
All right, let's cook, baby. Let's cook. All right. So yeah, again, and a couple other things I failed to mention. Everybody's going to get the slide deck. Everybody's going to get the recording. So I promise you, I challenge you. You're not going to be able to absorb everything tonight. Brian and I are both known for talking pretty quickly here, and we try to cover it all, and we kind of err on that side, knowing that we're going to be going a little too fast through some things, but we want to give you the information. You will get the recording tomorrow, and you will get the slide deck tomorrow. But again, make sure that you stick around till the end tonight. We got some really great giveaways. If it's the first time kind of seeing us, our company, College Aid Pro, pretty simple mission, but a pretty tough one. We're trying to end the student loan crisis. And you don't end this by forgiving debt at the end. You end it by educating folks at the beginning where you are and helping you make great decisions, right? And we say it every day. We have all the evidence to support this. Your kids can go have an amazing experience at an amazing school, graduate with amazing opportunities. And you can do that in such a way that it doesn't cost $90,000 a year. You get to retire someday as parents, and your kid doesn't graduate with an unmanageable amount of debt, right? That's what we're looking to do here. In I guess its simplest terms. You guys got an email earlier today encouraging you to create your free MyCap accounts, right? If you didn't do that already, do it right now. Take the minute and do it right now. It's going to make for a better presentation tonight, and you're going to answer some of the most important questions that I know you guys are having, as kind of demonstrated by the questions that I'm getting already. I'll put this in the chat here. But this is, and I saw most of you already created your accounts, which is great because you've already seen, as a result of creating that account, what's your family's EFCs, right? Which is a short way of saying what, or is I guess a more technical way of saying what's your family's financial aid eligibility or lack thereof. Okay, where you're going to get scholarships, where you're going to get financial aid, and at what particular colleges. And what I'm going to do is just jump in this platform real quick because I think it's the easiest way to coach through. Sorry about this. Some of these huge changes that are coming, that are changing in the FAFSA for the class 2024 and beyond. So again, if you haven't created your account, go on to that link, create your account right now. And for those of you that have, hopefully you have it up right now. And what's staring you in the face is these EFCs, right? This is a dollar amount that the federal government, the federal EFC, says that your family can pay each year for college. And then there's an institutional EFC that a lot of these private schools factor in and say that you can pay for college. Oftentimes, these two numbers are very different for two main variables. Number one, if you're a homeowner, schools that use this formula usually look at your home equity to varying degrees. That's why Boston University, NYU, for example, they're expecting you to pay a lot more because they think your home equity is fair game. Okay. You don't need to necessarily know all the ins and outs there. Our platform will do the work for you, right? And you see all the sticker prices at these schools, but I just want you focused on what's your net cost. What are you going to actually pay if your kid's accepted at this college? And that's where I want you living, right? Because for most families, the sticker price is irrelevant. It all comes down to your net cost. Are you getting a discount? How much? Is it from financial aid? Is it from scholarships? And if I click on any of these schools, it'll tell me why I'm getting a discount. And then specifically, is it scholarships? Is it financial aid? Is it both? So you can get a little bit more context in terms of the why, but put some of your top schools in and see what they're actually going to cost you. That's where we want to start the process, right? Another big reason, and this is our first and one of the major FAFSA changes, that schools that use this institutional methodology tend to have higher EFCs. If you are a divorced or separated family, if you are a two-household family, they are looking at the income and assets from both households, okay? Whereas schools that use the federal methodology, they're only looking at income and assets from one household, okay? Now, this is one of the huge changes. It used to be that the colleges that the household that the colleges are looking at is and the one that's required to complete the FAFSA in two household families is whoever the student lives with the most. The terminology that these colleges use is the custodial household. Okay, so previously, right, for if you've been through this before with an older kid or you've talked to your buddies, right, that have been through this before, it used to be that if you were a two household family, divorced or separated, whoever the kid lived with the most, that parent completed the FAFSA. And that dictated the federal EFC, okay, and how much or little you get in financial aid. Huge change. Now the federal government, Department of Education, wants the household that provides the most financial support to be the one that completes the FAFSA. And for most families, this is a gray area, right? As I've been talking to a ton of divorced and separated families, just saying, well, and saying, well, how are you going to handle this? Who provides the most financial support? They're like, well, I don't know. You know, they pay child support, $10,000 a year, but I pay the mortgage. I pay for groceries. I pay for fees. I'm the one that says, here's $20 for spending money. Probably pretty close. Good. Use that gray area to your advantage and be smart with who completes the FAFSA. You want to be strategic and see to it that the one that completes the FAFSA is the one that is providing the most financial or is the one that has the least income and the least assets, the one that's going to give you the lowest EFC and the most need-based financial aid eligibility. See to it that that parent or household is the one that provides the most financial support, if you can. For some families, it's very obvious and there isn't a gray area. But if you have, something we say every day is we want to control the controllables. We can't control what these colleges decide to charge each year, but there's a bunch of other things we can control. And if we make good decisions, we're going to be in good shape. So this is one of them. And that's one FAFSA change I want you to pay attention to. The other huge one is that right now, if you have more than one kid in college at once, whether it's twins or they're 2 years apart, but they're both enrolled, you get a significant discount, as you would expect. They say, hey, you have this fixed income, fixed assets, but now you got 2 kids in college. The rule always accounted for that and gave families a break and basically split their EFCs in half between each kid. That's going away. You are no longer getting a break at these federal schools if you have more than one kid in school at once. So that is going to screw a lot of families and effectively double the cost of college for a lot of families. So we really just need to be aware of that. And it's not at every college, okay? A lot of these colleges that do use this institutional methodology and all this stuff is baked into the platform. I'm telling you more than you need to know in a lot of ways. Let the technology do the thinking for you. But Any school that uses the federal EFC, they're not going to give the sibling discount anymore. So it's a big deal. But for those that and after Brian starts talking, we started a petition to try to stop this rule from going through. We've got about 70,000 signatures. If we get to 100,000, we literally have a chance to prevent it from going through. I'll put that link to the petition in again when Brian's talking, but it's something that again is a big deal, and I want to make sure that you are aware of. The last major FAFSA change that again I just want to flag applies to small business owners. Okay, it used to be that on the FAFSA, if you have less than 100 employees, you did not have to report any of your business assets or anything in your business. If you had less than 100 employees, it's as if your business doesn't exist, right? You don't report anything on the FAFSA. They got rid of that. So now if it's even you as a sole proprietor, they want you to report specifics and investment savings, et cetera, in your business on a FAFSA. And that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem for a lot of people, specifically all small business owners. So that's a sweet spot of ours as well. My short advice there is too many business owners are too proud of their businesses and their valuations. I get it. I am too, right? We overvalue ourselves. This is not where we want to do it, right? You want to be bearish. And for most people, if you walk away from your business tomorrow, there's no value there. Don't be scared to put a zero, okay? Obviously, that's not a blanket recommendation. And small business owners, divorced families, these are some of our sweet spots that we advise on here. But that would be, again, kind of my elevator pitch recommendation. Don't overvalue your business when they're going to now require that information on the FAFSA starting next year and moving forward. So those are our quick hitters. Again, when you get the deck tomorrow, you're going to get a summary of all the FAFSA changes, big, small, and otherwise. But again, all these things are already baked into the technology, to the platform, and accounted for. Ultimately, you guys should be focused on what are these schools actually going to cost me and my kid, on not only in year one, but for all 4 years here. So let me give you the mic here, Brian, and I'll do my best to hammer away at questions.
Sounds good. Thank you a lot, Matt, and very similar. Every time I feel like we talk, I'm learning something new about the financial aid. The multiple children thing is the one that bothers me the most. As someone who has worked with families of twins and triplets and kids, I work for a school that is very much a legacy school, and so we have multiple sets of kids coming through, and it's definitely going to change the game for a lot of families. So in regards to kind of admissions, just quickly, kind of some of the things we're going to go through tonight. Again, there is so much going on in college admissions. There's so much always going on, but particularly since COVID and kind of the end of at least officially the end of the pandemic, even more has changed. But some of the stuff that we're going to go over is kind of the changing acceptance rates at some of the four-year schools, some of the top ones, kind of a new era of early applications as it relates to test optional, that test optional wave that has certainly come from the COVID pandemic, kind of the qualitative versus the quantitative aspects of the application, and why letters of recommendation have become so much more important. It was already a couple of questions about it in the Q&A, but the digital SAT and the PSAT and what it may mean for you going forward. And then also we'll dabble into some of the migration of our students as we move around. So the first thing I always like to do when I'm talking about college admissions is give a landscape of exactly how it works. And so this is one very general, very dumbed down, but it gives you an idea of kind of what is happening. As Matt said, I worked for close to a decade on the college side, worked for a very small school, worked for kind of a medium-sized specialized business school. And then at BU, when I was reading thousands of applications every year. When I was at BU, my specific territory was Texas and Oklahoma. And so I was kind of the territory manager, as it's known for that. And when applications came from Texas or Oklahoma, I was always the first person to read those applications. It was my job to get to know those high schools, to get to meet those students, to go out to those places and travel. But I was never the only set of eyes. And I think this is kind of the first kind of take a deep breath and realize that there's never really going to be just one set of eye on your application. Now, there were the obvious candidates. I would say most college admissions worlds, there's kind of a 5% on either side, and then a 5% are just home runs, wow, automatically. And then a 5% that maybe, maybe their counseling just wasn't on and it's just not the right fit for the student. Even those guys would get a second pair of eyes. Most applications will get 3-4 sets. So there's usually a second reader that would be someone at an associate director or supervisor level. Sometimes you would have a partner that you would switch. And this is to make sure there's no bias within the application process. Most would then go on to a committee, and this is exactly what you would expect it to see. There are some videos on YouTube of committees, schools that have allowed people to videotape their committees. And it's people sitting around a table and making decisions on a student. Sometimes the person who was the original reader is allowed in there. Sometimes they're not. So again, that bias is taken away. And then there's even further committees, such as a scholarship committee. Maybe there's a special interest committee, whether it be about legacy, although we'll talk about that in a little bit. Specific academic programs like an accelerated medical program or pre-dental or pre-med. Obviously athletes, and how does that work in? And then there's usually that final sign off that comes from a VP of enrollment or a dean of admission or something like that. And so when you're thinking about kind of what goes into a decision, and this has been updated and kind of changed over the past few years, academic rigor is always going to be king. So what academic rigor means to a school are what are the courses that you're taking and how are you achieving in them in relation to what has been offered at your high school. And so I say that because specifically I always get questions of, okay, well, I go to a high school that limits me to take 3 APs a year, but I have a friend who goes to another high school where they can take 4 or 5. Does that make his application stronger? The answer is no. You are judged by what you can do based on what is available in your high school. So if you can only take 3 a year, that's the maximum they're going to know. The way colleges will know that is each application comes with what is known as a school profile that your high school has. In most all cases, you can ask your high school to view it. It basically just breaks down exactly how your high school operates. GPA, whether it's weighted, unweighted, what are the courses that are offered? Are there limitations? What are some of the graduation requirements? Things like that. Grades are obviously important. And then what has become a massive kind of increases importance is that personal essay as well as supplemental essays. For those who don't know what they are, supplemental essays are additional essays that schools can ask you to fill out that are a little more specified to their institution. So maybe they're asking why you're interested. Maybe they're asking about their mission statement. Maybe they're asking something a little more unique about their history or even something a little more relaxed or laid back, but they're trying to get an idea of who you are as a student. These have increased in value and in number of applications over the years. 3 or 4 years ago, I'd say the average student I worked with had maybe 2 to 3 supplemental essays. I worked with students this past year, and I've already started a plan working with students this year that are going to have upwards of 15 to 20 supplemental essays. And these range everywhere from 200 words to 50 words to 500 words. And so it's definitely a plan that kind of needs to be built. The students that I'm working with, we're already building those plans out so that they're getting a jump on these in the summer. Now, SATs and ACT scores are still important. I still encourage families to take standardized tests. But that being said, and we'll learn a little bit more, close to 2,000 schools now have some sort of test optional policy. We'll talk a little bit about what that means for some of the higher institutions, but at least right now, you should very much consider, SATs and ACT scores and taking those tests. Personal background characteristics play in. So are you a first generation student? Are you an athlete? But even things like gender, race, all that can come into play. Obviously, that can change with some of the Supreme Court rulings that are currently out there at the moment. Legacy is something that I still put there, but we'll talk a little bit about how that's dwindling. And then last is demonstrated interest. What about campus visits? What campus visits are you going on? What are high school visits that you're going on? Interviews, and how are you making yourself, and Matt's heard me say this so many times, make yourself more of a person and less than a piece of paper in the process. The more you can make yourself a person and make you known to that college rep, when they go to sit down and talk to you, that makes a huge difference. So there is this whole other side of the college application process in terms of the decision, and that is the college side. And this is kind of where, and it's something that can be maybe blunt or a little too honest, but when I'm working with my seniors, the first slide of my presentation every year with those parents is it says college admissions is unfair. And this is a great example of where college admissions can be unfair. You could have done everything right. You could have had the great list of activities, good SAT scores, great essays, good grades, but there are still the priorities of the institution. So what are their overall admission strategies? What deadline are you applying for? And what does their admit rate change depending on that deadline? What are some of the new academic trends? Is there new programs that they're looking to fill? Might be a little easier to get into those programs on one year comparable to the next. What is the overall kind of stability? Just like every other field and area of business, higher education was hit by COVID as well too. And so you have seen a number of schools close or have to adjust their financial strategy moving forward. And I would say right off the bat, when you're visiting schools, it is not inappropriate in any way, shape, or form to ask about the financial stability and the financial future of schools moving forward. But how does that play into their admission strategy? Are they able to give as much scholarship money as maybe they were pre-COVID? Have they changed how they do that? How do they deal with their financial aid packages? All of this is very individual to schools and can change from year to year. And that plays into kind of that merit and that financial aid strategy. But then there's even things like student population priorities. Did they over enroll a certain academic major in the year before? And they can't do that again because there's only so many spots. I've worked with schools that have said simply, Brian, unfortunately, we enrolled too many females last year. And so we need to even out our gender equality. So it's going to be a little harder for a student who's female to get in this year than maybe past years. There are schools that have been over enrolled for the last few years, and we'll talk about this more in depth since COVID. So those schools are now much more harder to get into because you can't keep over enrolling or else kids are going to be sleeping on the street and not in dorm rooms. And so you have to make sure that you're hitting that number. And then athletic recruitment sometimes doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not the right fit or you don't fit their roster, and this can count for visual art or theater art programs too, sometimes it doesn't necessarily make that difference. So some of the kind of larger global admissions trends that we've seen, and I've hinted at it, but one of the biggest that we have hinted on, and a lot of this has come out since the Varsity Blues scandal. For those who don't know what that is, there's a great documentary on Netflix for it. I would suggest it. But it's a Varsity Blues scandal was when some really kind of, I would say, top echelon 0.5% of 1%ers really took advantage of the admissions kind of legacy and using athletics to game the system in what was essentially an illegal way. After this, even schools that weren't necessarily part of that unknowingly or knowingly really took a look at a lot of their admissions policy. And one of the general things that came out was many felt as though they were using legacy too much. What legacy is if you have a family member, most notably a parent or a sibling, but even sometimes a cousin or a grandparent that attended that university before and graduated from that university, maybe they've donated some money, that can play a part of your admissions process. Now, I'm not saying that has completely gone away. There are still schools that are using it, but what I would say is that, prior to COVID, 56% of the top 250 institutions were considering legacy. Now you're seeing schools saying they're not using it all, or they're just dialing it back to a large degree, and that maybe it doesn't have the push on your application that it might have had 5 or 10 years ago. One of the biggest things that we're seeing with students, not only in higher education and in college admissions, but just in education in general, is the use of AI. And ChatGPT is kind of the top one. Let me just say this more as a warning. Please don't use it for essays. Many schools have come out saying they're developing programming to be able to, judge on that and make sure that it was written by not only that student, but just a human as well. One of the biggest things that I always tell students is ChatGPT can do a lot of things, but it lacks the ability to show empathy, growth, and introspection. And the key of the college essay is you're showing people a side of yourself, that human side, that otherwise wouldn't show up on your application. And so why would you have that key part taken away by using something? I have myself, being in the field, I want to know what I'm up against. And I have, used it and said, write an essay about this topic, write about an essay on this topic. There are people that have written and read even more essays than I have. But as someone who's between my college career and now, working with high school students in private, I've read well over 100,000 college essays. I can tell the difference because you can tell the difference not only if it's a 17-year-old writing it and an adult writing it, but definitely a computer program. The other thing, and this is no surprise to anyone, but application volumes just continue to go through the roof. There was a 30% increase in applications through the Common Application in the last 3 years. A lot of this did have to do with the test optional movement. And so obviously in 2020, when COVID first struck and everything kind of shut down, test centers were not immune to that. And so it just became physically impossible for students to take the SAT or the ACT. So schools were forced to go with test optional policies. That pretty much meant every school across the country. And so because of that, students saw that as an opportunity. Well, maybe I can go for that reach school because I don't have to put in my test score anymore. Is this ultimately a great thing? Yes, it provides access in a way that maybe it didn't before for a lot of schools. But what it also you have to realize is just because that school gets more applications doesn't mean they're going to admit more kids. There's still the same amount of beds and still the same amount of spots that they're thinking about. And so what we've seen is some of those top 50 schools, not only the Ivy Leagues, but schools like NYU, Northeastern, BU, Boston College, Northwestern, they have had these, University of Virginia is another one, these real high rise in applications, but they're still admitting the same kids. And so just to keep in mind that test optional means more access, it doesn't necessarily mean more admission. You still need to be a viable candidate for that school. And every other piece of your application becomes heightened in importance when you don't put those test scores in. But you're seeing just some of the increases over the past couple of years from some of the top schools, NYU, University of Georgia, and Northeastern, just in a 3-year period. You know, we're seeing top school admission rates just continue to go down. The Ivy League admission rates have dropped 1.5 points since 2019. Well, that doesn't seem like a lot when you consider the average admission rate for an Ivy school is around 6%. Yeah, that 1.5 points can make a big difference. And then we're even seeing in the top 30 schools where you're seeing a lot of those kids who maybe were applying to Ivies, but now are thinking about the BUs, the Purdue's, the BC's, the University of Virginia, the University of Michigan, the Cal Berkeley's. We're seeing a drop of acceptance to them of close to 3.25%. And again, when you're thinking about the nuance, they're not in single digit, but they're still 10, 12, 13, 14 admit rate. That makes a huge difference. Obviously test up. Oh, sorry about that.
Sorry, Brian, that's my fault, but I was trying to interrupt you anyways, I guess, because and everybody, please, I'm sure we got a bunch of people that showed up after the first few minutes when we did our housekeeping stuff. Please do us a favor, put your questions in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. Again, I love it. Keep them coming. You guys are testing us rapid fire here. We got over, I don't know, 60 questions or something already, which is awesome. But for those of you that I've kind of lost you in the chat, so please just, if you put something in there, I promise we're not ignoring you. Just copy and paste it, throw it in the Q&A. We'll get them answered as best we can. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Test optional, I've talked about a lot already. It's funny, the number continues to rise. This was 1,700 a couple of weeks ago when we first started making these slides. It's now closer to 1,900 schools have some type of test optional policy. There's predicted to be well over 100 schools that will be test free by this upcoming year. What that means is it doesn't matter if you have a 1,600, they're not going to look at your score. Some of the more notable schools that are test free are the entire University of California state system. So UCLA, UCal Berkeley, UC Davis, Cal State Fullerton, WPI, a great engineering school here in Massachusetts, is also a school that's test free, as well as Holy Cross. There are some schools that are reverting back to requiring test scores, and you're seeing some of those below there: MIT, Purdue, Georgetown, and then the Florida state school system has kind of gone opposite of the California state school system, and they're going to require. So, you know, counseling is crucial in this in terms of how I counsel and advise students is going to greatly vary on what their college list looks like, on how I'm going to, you know, we're going to discuss standardized testing. Early decision and early action has provided a better opportunity for acceptance through test optional in the past couple of years, and there'll be some numbers to show that. But this is some data we've seen, particularly with the top schools over the past year to 2 years, that if you're going to apply test optional, it is good practice to try to apply early. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean going early decision. Obviously, there's some other factors you have to consider into play, but if a school has an early action process or just a priority deadline that maybe you can apply, we're finding schools are more willing to take chances on kids in test optional in early applications than they are in regular decision. And, you know, as that pool gets smaller and they've already accepted a lot of kids, naturally, they're going to gear maybe towards those kids that they can assure are going to be academically ready for those institutions. We talked a lot about those application lists growing and those numbers growing. So because of that, wait lists and deferral lists are growing larger, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're easier to get off of. For those who don't know what deferral means, it means you apply maybe early action or early decision, and the school doesn't say no, but they just say not right now. They want to see a little bit more, another semester's worth of grades, maybe an additional essay, something like that. We're seeing a lot of schools do that. We're particularly seeing that with top tier schools. And the main reason that they're doing wait lists and deferral lists, as I mentioned earlier, many top tier schools have over enrolled in the past couple of years and simply can't keep over enrolling. And so because of that, they went with the strategy to essentially admit a lot less kids this year than in past years, and then help make their number by slowly plucking kids off of that deferral and then slowly plucking kids off the wait list to kind of cater to their needs. Because if they started to admit that same number and then had too many kids show up again, there was going to be a real issue in terms of kind of ability to house all those kids and have the same average class size that they want to have and have the same student to faculty ratio that they want to have. And so we've seen drops of 7, 8, even 10% with some of the schools in the top 50 and top 100. And really the concern for myself as a counselor is this is going to create a waterfall effect, because now what you're going to see is those kids who maybe would have gotten into those top schools aren't, because of the competitiveness, go to that next tier schools that are still excellent schools, but naturally they're going to then take spots. And so that's a larger concern and kind of a rethinking of, how I build students' college lists when I'm thinking about what kind of safety schools do I need to put on there, what kind of diversity, how big should their list be. 6 years ago, I would have told you, 9 to 11 schools is a perfect size for a list. We're in a world now where maybe it's closer to 12 to 14, maybe even 15 to 16, depending on what major you're applying to. And that's, kind of a big thing, that an adjustment in my world that I'm working on as I work with students one-on-one.
Good for business for those colleges, right? Just racking up those applications.
Yep, they love those numbers. And as I said before, early deadlines are more popular than ever. Obviously, Ivies are always going to have strong early applications, but they saw even an increased amount. Brown, a 10% increase. It's their 5th year in a row they've increased early apps. Dartmouth, a 14% increase. Yale was a 35% increase over the past 3 years. If you think about that from a larger picture, it's just insane. And many schools, including, my former employer, BU, are using those early deadlines to fill half, if not more than half, of their first year class. So again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of those students that are going test optional are going early to give themselves their best chance. So you can see kind of the difference. 55% of BU's first year class of the students who are enrolled and are going were admitted through early decision. That leaves a much smaller amount from a much larger application pool in their regular decision pool. And of that cohort, only 31% submitted test scores. But then you can see 54% of the students who admitted to the BU class of 27 submitted standardized test scores. So a much larger percentage of students' regular decision to make up that number were admitted with test scores over not test scores. Even in Virginia, you're seeing 42% opted not to submit test scores, but only 26% of those students were test optional. And so of accepted students. And so you're seeing, again, I'm going to counsel students probably to go a little bit earlier this year if they're going test optional at some of those top tier schools. And this is just a graph. I think this will be something, definitely spend some time when you get the slides tomorrow. It just shows the change in some of the admit rates comparable to no test to WIS test for some of the top tier schools around the country. And includes even some of the, breaks down between ED1 to ED2 for some schools and how that looks. And then I think this is a great graph that kind of shows just the difference in, how early decision has changed and how early action apps have changed in the admission rates. The number in parentheses next to school is kind of their average acceptance rate per year. I did a range just to kind of give you an idea over the past few years of what it may look like, but you're seeing the vast difference in acceptance rate from early to regular. And as I give these numbers, again, this isn't a stamp to say you should apply to every school by October 15th and go early action, early decision. Sometimes that doesn't make sense financially. Sometimes it doesn't make sense for you as a student or a major. What I am trying to say is a solid strategy now is to have a mix of schools where you're applying early and regular. no student should be necessarily just waiting to apply to all schools regular decision anymore, unless there's a really external reason, financial, something like that, that it just doesn't suit the individual family. But from a general counseling standpoint, we want a good mix of schools that we're applying to early and regular decision. And especially if you're applying to some of these top tier schools, because you're seeing the vast difference of chances of getting in right here. You look at Emory, for example, 26%, 37%, 37% for the early round, except where their average admit rate is only 13 to 18%. Look at Williams College, part of those, the baby Ivies, as they're called, the NESCAC schools. Their admit rate notably always in single digits, but it's 3 out of 10 chance if you're applying early round. And so just a much different opportunity to apply if you apply early.
Brian, let me give you just a second to catch your breath. And we're getting a bunch of questions all along. What's the difference between early decision, early action, maybe deferral and wait list? I think the most important one is early decision versus early action, right? When you apply early decision, first of all, you can only apply early decision to one school, because you are telling that school, if I get accepted, I'm coming to your college. I'm signing a contract that obligates me to come to that college. So this one, how we coach it, and Brian, I'm sure will have some of his own commentary, is, it's a big decision because you don't want to tell that school you're going there unless, number one, as a student, you're like, this is my place. I've had the epiphany, my aha moment. This is my dream school. I have to be here. And then as a family, we have a really good understanding of what this school is going to cost us. And you should, that's in some ways your responsibility. You should have an idea what the school is going to cost you. And you can look at that number and say, we can do this. Okay. If you can check both of those boxes with a lot of confidence, you have our blessing, apply early decision. If you don't, if there's hesitation on either, we're probably going to have you pause. Again, I'll let Brian speak for himself here. So that's like a really important decision that you're going to have to be incredibly thoughtful around. Whereas early action, I can apply early action all 14 of the schools if they have the option there. Not everybody does. I'm not beholden to any one of them, right? I find out earlier if I got in, I got my aid package earlier, but there's no obligation. I've just accelerated my timeline, as opposed to the regular decision. So piggyback on it if you want, Brian, but I just want to make sure I hit that and give you a second to catch your breath there.
I appreciate the breath there, but you hit the nail on the head. Our early decision is obviously a tactic that can be really advantageous for a family, but I think especially here at College A Pro and then at Archbishop Williams of the high school I work at, I take it very seriously. The way I always say it, and I don't know if you said this, I was answering some questions too, but I take it seriously as a counselor because I have to sign off on it too, as does the parent. And so that's kind of my word out there. That's the onus of the relationship that I've built with the college. And so I always tell my students, like, we're going to make sure we're doing this the right way. And so, it can be a good opportunity for students. And if a student is a little below those averages, but no, it's their top choice, then yeah, we go for it. But you want to make sure you're not just doing it just to do it, because if it's not necessarily our top choice, you don't want to necessarily get shoehorned into that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. On to the next year, right?
Yeah, so we've had a couple questions about this, but one of the biggest changes in college admissions that is coming is the College Board. I joked on the webinar last week when we talked about this. For any other nerdy golf fans like myself, there's a lot of drama in golf right now between LIV and the PGA. I would say it's similar in terms of the angst between counselors and the College Board at the moment when it comes to the digital SAT. I already am up at night thinking about how I'm going to host a digital SAT at school. But if you are a rising senior, you got one more shot to take the paper SAT for the fall. And then after that, there are no more paper tests. This was the last year for paper AP exams. Many schools actually already did digital this year as kind of a test progress. The PSAT will be digital next year. Now, what are some of the changes? The changes are the test is a little bit shorter. It's, right around 2 hours rather than 3 hours. There are some deeper things that I won't get too into because I don't want to freak anyone out, but there is kind of what I'll say is the beginning of the test is very important because the scoring has changed a little bit. And then after that first section, you will essentially be put into kind of a pot, and there's only a certain score that you can get after getting that score, depending on what you get on the first time. Now, you won't know what your score is or what pot you fall into, but it is important to do very well. So, for those kids who maybe kind of work their way into a test or ease into, you have to very much nail that first section on the digital SAT or digital PSAT. You can take this on a laptop, an iPad, a desktop computer. They really do encourage you to not try to take it on a tablet base, though, just because there's just more of a natural fit with typing over maybe using your hands. There are shorter reading passages. The whole kind of no calculator option is out the window now. All math sections will have calculator allowed. And I think this is something that maybe they just didn't do a good job of explaining, which doesn't necessarily shock me when it comes to the College Board, but you still have to take it as a test at a testing center. This isn't something like you can take it home. You still have to take it at school or at a testing center on the weekend. And then I think one thing that is really important is know that any accommodations that any student has, whether that be extra time, reduced distraction rooms, all of that will still count with the digital SAT. So one of the things that I kind of want to wrap up, and we've talked a lot about it within the Q&A, but as we're working through, the qualitative portion of the student has just become so much more important when it comes to admissions. And a lot of that has not only had to do with SAT and ACT kind of losing some of its importance. I've mentioned this on other webinars, but the National Association of College Admissions Counselor does this survey every year with counselors that ask kind of what's the most important piece of the application. In 2018, the SATs and ACTs were ranked second, right below grades. In 2021, they were ranked sixth. Items like letters of recommendation and college essays and supplemental essays and demonstrated interest jumped that. Now, that doesn't mean that for every single school, but it gives you an idea of kind of nationwide what is happening. Academic rigor is and will always be king. What are the grades you're getting and what are the classes you're getting them in? So I saw a question and I made sure to answer it right away. Someone had a misguided friend who said AP scores or AP classes don't matter anymore. They matter more than ever. And what I mean by that is don't freak out if you don't have AP scores or you don't have AP classes. What I mean by that is challenge yourself in the areas that you can be successful. So if you can take an honors level course in a math because you're a good math student, take that. If you can take an accelerated math course in a social science because you're a great writer and you're interested in history, then take that. It is challenging yourself within the classes that have been offered to you. So a school will look at the curriculum available at your high school and how have you put yourself in that. Doing well in those high-level courses and exams, particularly now AP and IB exams are being looked at maybe a little bit closer than they might have for those schools who are going test optional but still want to see what a test looks like for a student will always help. But it is now also even more crucial for students to get outside their comfort zone. And so I always work with students in terms of kind of building their portfolio to look as best as possible for students. And a lot of you have probably done some amazing things, whether it be, being a captain or being a club president and stuff like that. And that's great. But being a captain doesn't differentiate you in the college admissions process. There are 4.5 million captains in high school sports in America. It is what you do once you get captain that is the difference. And so when I'm working with students, I try to help them describe their activities and the difference between being involved, which means being a member of the club, being invested, which means maybe you're, going to more meetings, maybe you've developed a leadership position, and then being impactful. So who are those students that when they leave those organizations or when they leave that high school, they're leaving a legacy and they're leaving an imprint? Those are the type of kids that make a difference. Another great example of this is National Honor Society. I have my own opinions on National Honor Society. One of the things that I think people are surprised about is there's actually no general guideline across the country for National Honor Society. Each school makes up their own kind of set of rules of who gets in and why they get in. And so colleges don't really value it as much as I think students think it does. It is what you do once you get in National Honor Society that makes the difference. And so as you're thinking about your senior year or your junior year, or even if you're just entering high school, you don't necessarily need to sign up for 15 clubs. Those students that do 1 to 2 and make a vast difference in those, they can be just as impactful, not only in their school, but then obviously in their college application process. And I mentioned it earlier, but a thing that has become even more important now are letters of recommendation. And so it's really important that you're thinking hard about who you're going to be asking to write for you in your process? Who do you want to speak for you? Now, most all schools will have a counselor write a letter of recommendation. I write letters, as do my colleagues at Archbishop Williams. And then most colleges will require 2 teacher letters of recommendation. Now, there is a strategy to asking letters of rec. If you're an engineering applicant, you probably want at least one STEM-based class, whether it be a lab science or a math. If you're applying to education or business, it's always good to have maybe an English teacher or someone who can speak to your writing or maybe your speaking skills. But that being said, if I'm looking for teachers who can tell a story about growth in the classroom, good letters that are written, the counselor writes about who you are as a person, and the teacher writes about who you are as a student or a citizen in their classroom. So don't necessarily run towards that freshman or sophomore teacher that you got a straight A with. Who's a teacher that you really had to work hard with that could tell a greater story? You can also ask for, outside letters of rec, whether that be a teacher, another teacher, or a coach, or a boss, even somebody that you babysat with. Now, the large majority of schools will not allow parents to write letters of recommendation. So just kind of keep that in mind. But there are kind of interesting ways that you can get kind of more people to speak for you in this process. And it is becoming so much more important. Those words, as schools look for nuances and differences between applicants, this is a big way that they look for that.
Okay, so a couple kind of closing thoughts here, and obviously we'll make sure that we get till a couple questions, and then I have, like I said, kind of as promised, some specific things I want to show you guys. One of them that we got a ton of, Brian, and I'm sure you'll want to kind of layer on to what I'm saying here, but is like, should we send the ACT? Should we send the SAT? Should we send both? Should we not send? Is it test optional? Is it not test optional? What should we do there? And I'll kind of, I know I'm, mowing your lawn a little bit here, but, just in having worked with you with a lot of families, specifically on this one, where I know you're a little bit of a calculator when it comes to this, but in my experience, again, specifically in kind of collaborating with you, because this is not my sweet spot, this one in particular, right? If you haven't, Brian's really the admissions guru, I'm more on the financial side. But I'll go to him and say, Brian, here's the SAT score, here's the ACT score, here's the 12 schools they're applying to, where should we send them, right? And usually Brian's like, send them here, don't send them here, send them here, don't send them, don't send them, don't send them. And I find it to be incredibly common and I guess that was kind of a surprise to me. Like, I think most people look at it as, do we send them or do we not send them? When it's usually both. And as that list of colleges come to fruition, he's going to tell us you should send them here, you shouldn't send them here, just obviously based on the score and based on the particular school. So if you want to layer on there, we got a bunch.
Yeah, it is definitely not a yes or no for all schools. I think I mentioned it before in years past when I've worked with students. There's maybe been 1 or 2 students out of the entire caseload of students that I work with where we send scores to all schools. And those are students who are obviously scoring 1550 and above, or 34 to 36 and above on the ACT. And so what you're going to do is you're going to look school to school and decide what is most competitive for me. Am I right around the averages? Let's look at some of the acceptance rates in recent history for schools when it comes to test optional. And that's the decision we're going to make. And again, this is where having really solid counseling can kind of help you make these right decisions, and that it's not just okay, well, I got a 1220. I'm really confident in that score. I'm going to send it to all my schools. Because for some schools, that might be a knock it out of the park score. But for others, you may be well below their averages, and maybe not sending that score, but still sending your strong grades can make you a much better applicant.
Yeah, exactly. Great call. So quickly, it seems to me that we have, my intuition is telling me here that we have more students on here than we typically do versus parents. Just kind of curious, say if you're a student, if you're a parent, or if you're both, if you guys are kind of checking us out together, because again, typically we have a more, I guess, parent focused a crowd where, again, we are seeing just more students than parents, which is interesting, right? I'm just kind of curious what, because it's a little bit different from our normal. I like the both too. That seems like it's some nice family bonding here, Brian. We're getting some people in the same room under the same roof, so That's great. That's kind of cool too. So I like to see the families kind of invested together. So what I want to leave you with, and like I said, we'll get to some questions, and I'm not saying that we're going to kick you out of here exactly at 8 o'clock here, but we always like to make sure that people understand how they can interface with us moving forward. If you haven't set up your free MyCap account, make sure that you do that. That's going to be kind of the foundation of this process for you. If you haven't been to our website, collegeaidpro.com, we got a whole section of free resources. Join our make sure you sign up for our YouTube thing, get in our Facebook group. It's moderated by our experts. All the free resources that you can handle, right? And even within your free cap account, if you ever want to just book an hour to talk with one of us, you can just do so in the top right here, right? You can talk with Brian, myself, or anybody on our team, right? We have an incredible team. We have if you want to talk to the director of financial aid at Harvard, at MIT, at some of these amazing schools, folks that have been in this industry forever, you can just do that for your platform. Again, book a time to meet with an individual or just the next available, and you're going to be in great hands. But what I think, and this is not for everybody, but we do this is always, because we have to with the nature of our business, we have kind of seasonal pricing. And as we get closer to game time, we have to increase our prices for a couple different reasons. Number one, our roster just fills up. Brian can't work with that many more families. His roster is just about at its kind of breaking point, for the class of 2024. And we're approaching that for a lot of us as experts that work with us in our more comprehensive fashion, which I'm about to unpack here in a second. And we have a lot of prep work that happens behind the scenes, and the more time we have to prepare and collaborate as a team, the easier and kind of more cost effective and efficient it is for us. So that's why, again, we get really expensive when you want to hire us in October or whatever. That's just the nature of the business. Kind of like, think like rush delivery, right? Whereas if we have more time to prepare on our end, we can kind of do that. So again, tonight, I just want to make sure that you're clear on because this is what's going up in price, and we always have a really significant discount for our families that show up with us live. So we have a version of our services, our comprehensive services. We call it our Wake Me Up When It's Over packages, right? People seem to like that cute little name there, but that's the idea. And there's three basis packages we have. Generally, they're priced at $3,000, $4,000, and if you combine them, as opposed to the $5,000, or as opposed to $7,000, it's $5,000. For anybody that books with us tonight, you get $500 off. Okay, I understand that it is and I'll make sure that I put this the link in the chat. So there's the link, so you can check these out. But I'll kind of walk you through them. Quickly here. I understand this price point's not for everybody. And again, for those of you that it's not, use our free resources, continue to follow along, book an hour with us. But for anybody that wants more comprehensive help, again, you're not going to, this is as low as it's possibly going to get by a long shot, because again, we're going up in price for all these packages July 1st, right? So it's right around the corner, but the coupon code with the $500 off, that expires tonight, 12 Eastern time. Specifically, I know, so some of you are on the West Coast and even out there in Hawaii. So it's again, you got till 9 Eastern time or whatever that is in Hawaii before this expires. But for the financial aid piece of the puzzle, what we do there is you work one-on-one with myself or one of our experts through the entire process, where we help you build the list of colleges that are going to be most cost effective and also align with your kids' preferences, right? We complete all financial aid applications for you. We do the FAFSA, we do the CSS profile, we do the institutional applications, and there's a strategy there, right? We consider ourselves as like accountants within the financial aid system. How do we present your situation so you're going to get the biggest discounts? If you're a business owner, how do we nail that? If you're a two-household family, how do we nail that, right? Once we get the awards back from schools, you're accepted and you get an offer, we negotiate for more money. Okay, we're very good at that. That's part of our secret sauce there. It's called the appeal process, as a technical term we have to use. And then we show you how to pay the bill, right? This is 4 years that we got to think of this. More if we have multiple kids, we show you how to pay the bill down to the dollar, when to use what resources, right? If you have to borrow, what loan should your family take? And that's our deal. Obviously, it's not cheap at all, but that we are very good at showing a return on the investment. And again, it's going to be a significant amount more after July 1st and plus the $500 discount. So I totally understand that it's a leap, but if you think it's something that would benefit your family, tonight's the night to do it. So I have the link in there. And then the other two packages here. So specifically, if you just want admissions help, we don't care about the financial aid stuff, right? You just want admissions help. I want Brian to drag myself and specifically my kid through this entire admissions process. Then here you go. We have this solution for you. The best value, right? Even though it's a ton of money, I don't deny that it's a big investment. You have both, right? So you have kind of 2 for 1. I am driving the ship on the financial aid front. Brian's driving the ship on the admissions front, right? He's going to make sure that the list is the right list for your kid. He's going to tell you, send the ACT here. Don't send it here. He's going to make sure your essay is an essay that as he's reading it or his colleagues are reading it, this is the type of essay that gets in here, right? And make sure that we're nailing the Common App and everything else that's super, super relevant here, right? And I look at it as this is kind of a 2 for 1 deal in a lot of ways, and actually less than that, where you get to work with both of us. And I kind of look at it for the financial piece. I'm usually working with the parents. That's more parent-centric, whereas the admission is more student-centric. So if you want us to grab the wheel for both of you, that's where the admissions combo makes the most sense, right? And and again, you can kind of see it's kind of like the 2 birds with 1 stone here. We're nailing everything on the admission side, taking the wheel there, nailing everything on the admission side. And again, if that's something that you want, just use the link that's in the chat here. You select that, and there's some more details within there. But you can just, again, it's email, name, and then you can pay and obviously use the coupon code that is CAP 500, right? For the $500 off. You'll see this isn't, we'll do other deals for our live audiences at different times throughout the year, but it's just we do kind of these, flash sales, so to speak, when we do live events. Otherwise, when you go to look on our website tomorrow, you'll kind of see back to our kind of standard pricing. And again, the reason we do that, we like to reward those that show up live. And again, with this time of year, we don't have a choice but to create some urgency, just because these part of our programs, which is why I'm featuring it tonight, they fill up. We only have so many bodies on our team. We got a big team. But when we're looking at 4 million students going off to college next year, we can't service all of you, right? Again, that's kind of our deal there. And we do like to be transparent that we're going up in price, and you'll just, even if you're on our list at all, you'll kind of get a reminder the end of next week that that's happening, but you won't have the opportunity for that $500 discount. So I understand it's a leap, guys, but if it's even something to consider, don't overthink it. You will thank yourself. This is a lot of money. There's a lot on the line. There's a lot of stress involved. We've done this a bazillion times over. You're gonna get that money back and some many times over. That's why we're good at what we do, because it's a big investment, but we show a big return on that investment with a lot of consistency. And I know I'm biased here, right? But also I believe it. So yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. I'm just trying to see. Again, I know we can't get to, the same package applies 2025 families. The price increase won't apply to you. So for 2025 families, when we got that, thank you for that question. When we go up in price July 1st, we're only talking to class 2024 because we have that time to work with you. So the price increase won't apply to you, but you won't have the coupon code if it's something you thought you wanted to do. I'd recommend you take advantage of that. Okay, so I'm just seeing if we have any other kind of questions about our services. Unfortunately for these, we don't have a payment plan. Again, I know this is just our price points are a non-starter for certain families. We're not leaving you behind. Like I said, we have tons of free resources. Please take advantage of them. Continue to pay attention to all the content we offer. And again, you can always book an hour with anybody on our team if just you want a piece of guidance kind of at your disposal there. So I'll hang around for 1 or 2 more minutes if anybody has any particular questions around the packages themselves. And again, I get that it's elite, but you will thank yourself if you decide to. All right, somebody asked me to share the link again. Let me do that. So it is in the chat, and then just whatever one you want to purchase, do that. And then as soon as you do, you'll hear from our team tomorrow. The onboarding process starts tomorrow. You're going to hear from Lisa or Jackie or Jara. We're going to have to get, our kind of short list of information. We, by design, make that onboarding process really easy, really smooth. You'll hear from Brian tomorrow, because he's going to want a couple of things specifically on the admissions front. There's some specifics that he needs, right, in order to get rolling. So you'll hear from him tomorrow too with what he needs specifically on his end. And then again, you'll hear from one of our gals with what they need on the financial aid front. Okay. Yeah, and then quickly and I'm sorry we couldn't get to every question, guys, kind of as promised. That's just part of the deal too. We're outnumbered here. We're outgunned. But yeah, thanks for all the kind words. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully at a minimum, everybody learned a few things here. Oh, whoops, did I not put that? Somebody said I thought I put the link in. Somebody said I didn't put the link in. But continue to follow along with us, right? In whatever capacity you do. Again, for those of you able to make the investment, we're excited to work with you one-on-one. For those of you that aren't, we're excited to continue to coach you up one to many. So, Brian, thanks as always, man, as promised. I learned a whole bunch more. You guys will get the recording tomorrow. You'll get the slide deck tomorrow. And for those of you that are new to our community here, our ecosystem, welcome to College Aid Pro, and we're excited to continue to coach you up throughout this process.
Have a great night, everyone.
All right, see you, everybody.